So while we will not forego tough and contentious public discussion, even controversy, the challenges that we face are too pressing, too complex, and too important for us to let the question, how can this help in the next election, cloud our answers to the question, what is the best policy for our nation? The current political and media environment, however, provides powerful incentives to leave nuance and reason behind in favor of partisan vitriol. An increasingly fragmented media, scrambling to hold on to readers, viewers, and advertisers, is more and more focused on highlighting the extremes of our public discourse, where there was once a handful of national newspapers, a local paper, a few television and radio networks, and major national news magazines. There are now also 200 or more cable networks, thousands of blogs and websites, and millions of people on Twitter, all in a 24/7 battle for a slice of the audience. What too many of these outlets offer is simplistic attacks and bombast, not a principled conflict of ideas, but a personalized partisan contest, where scoring points means not offering the best solutions, but winning the day's news cycle. Too many public figures see that the best way to attract notice is to feed the media's appetite for the extreme. The result has been a fraying of the fabric that has kept us together for so long on national security issues. And we've stayed together despite our partisan loyalties or our ideological leanings. We're all vulnerable to the temptation to secure and score partisan points. In the heat of debate over contentious issues, I can probably think of a time or two when I veered across the line that divides sharp debate from partisanship. And if I couldn't recall, I'm sure that John McCain could help jog my memory. So how do we repair the frayed fabric? I believe that we will find lessons in history and opportunities to put those lessons into practice by addressing perhaps the biggest challenge that we now face. As you know, the Budget Control Act that Congress passed last year required us to find at least $1.2 trillion in deficit reduction over 10 years. And unless we act, we face draconian, across-the-board cuts to both security and domestic programs, cuts that sets no priorities, that make no hard choices. Our country cannot afford to allow those cuts to take place. The potential cuts to defense that would result from sequestration, as it's called, are a threat to our national security, and the domestic cuts would do terrible damage to education, health care, and much more. There is strong bipartisan agreement that these automatic cuts cannot stand. There is a huge inclination in both parties to find a solution. But any solution must be bipartisan. And a bipartisan solution will require compromises from both parties. My party will have to accept the reality that prudent, rational spending cuts, including a reining in of entitlements, must be part of the solution. That's going to be a difficult step for many in my party to take. But we have a powerful historical example to follow in the accomplishment of Senators Dole and Moynihan, a Republican and a Democrat, in the early 1980s to rescue Social Security when it was on the brink of collapse. Working together with other members of the Greenspan Commission who were willing to put national welfare above partisan interests, they crafted a solution that required everyone to give up a little in order to produce a larger good. And just as Democrats must face unpleasant facts, our Republican colleagues that the bipartisan solution to our budget situation must include revenue. Over the last decade or longer, We have allowed federal revenue to slide to its lowest level as a percentage of our economy in generations. We simply cannot protect important priorities unless we restore some of that lost revenue. The President's budget just received offers $3 trillion, by the way, in deficit reduction, more than enough to remove the threat of the automatic cuts. It actually includes a roughly equal amount of spending cuts and revenue increases. In this, he joins a long line of presidents, Democratic and Republican, from President Reagan to the first President Bush to President Clinton, who adopted deficit reduction plans that included both significant added revenue and spending cuts. I believe both parties, Democrats and Republicans, will accept these very difficult realities because the alternative, the draconian automatic cuts, are just too damaging to the country. The old saw about being able to lead a horse to water but not make him drink may not apply here, because when we lead the deficit horse to water later this year, the threat of sequestration just may make him drink. Others before us have succeeded when the challenges were even greater. In January of 1945, as World War II moved to an end, Senator Vandenberg came to the Senate floor to declare that America was at a critical moment. Conflicts among the allies who had fought the war and within our own nation about how to deal with the post-war landscape threatened to sow dangerous divisions. Vandenberg's prescriptions were simple. This is what he said: no man in his right senses will be dogmatic in his viewpoint at such an hour. Each of us, he said, can only speak according to his little lights and pray for a composite wisdom that shall lead us to high, safe ground. Now, Vandenberg and his peers achieved that openness to the ideas of others, that composite wisdom. He led Republicans to work with Democrats in crafting the Marshall Plan and the Atlantic Charter, helping to bring future peace to a war-torn world. We can learn from their example. We can do so with the support and vigilance of institutions such as CNI, whose hallmark and whose influence is not just a thread of realism in foreign policy, but one of civility and respect for the immense significance of the issues that we face as we seek to weave that realist thread. This room is filled with men and women who have done just that. I thank you for that. I thank you for the contributions that you have made to this nation, and I thank you for your recognition tonight. Thanks so much.